The first warning came as a whisper across the deep-range listening nets, a thin distortion in background radiation that the automated systems of the Soul Defense Network first tagged as sensor noise, and then, a fraction of a second later, reclassified as structured energy displacement, the kind that only came from mass exiting faster than light travel, and in control chambers buried under the crust of Luna. Officers who had spent decades watching silent starfields felt the air change as the displays shifted from calm blues to alert amber, and Captain Laura Bennett, who had commanded this watch for 3 years and had never once seen a real incursion alert outside of simulations, leaned forward and said quietly that something was coming in on the old invasion vectors, the routes every alien power had mapped and probed but never dared to cross in force, because humanity had made it clear that the Sol system was not a border but a fortress, and around her the junior officers checked, crossed confirmations, pulling data from outer picket arrays, from the heliopause monitors, from the long baseline gravimetric sensors that could feel a mass the size of a city moving through folded space, and as the information aligned, the system no longer whispered but spoke with certainty, multiple contacts, unknown configuration, mass readings far beyond any trading convoy or diplomatic mission, and the tone in the room shifted from routine professionalism to the focused stillness of people who understood that history might be about to turn. And when the identification routines failed to match the signatures to any known ally fleet, the implication was clear without anyone needing to say it. Someone had finally decided to test the warnings humanity had issued to the galaxy for 2 centuries, and in the depths of Earth's oceans, in the hollowed mountains, and in the vast orbital shipyards that ringed the planet and its moons, dormant systems began to wake, reactors spinning up, command AIs opening sealed data cores, and encrypted channels lighting as they passed priority traffic to the highest levels of military and civilian authority, and in the office of President Harold Mason, a former naval officer who had seen war from a bridge and lost from a distance, the secure display on his desk activated with a symbol that meant only one thing, that the shield around humanity's cradle was about to be tested. And as he read the initial report, he did not ask whether the intruders were hostile, because fleets of that mass did not cross into another power's core system to negotiate. They came to intimidate, to coerce, or to destroy, and the galaxy had a long history of doing all 3 to those it judged weak, and humanity, despite its rapid rise and its formidable technology, was still seen by many ancient civilizations as a young species, clever, loud, and dangerously confident, but unproven in true interstellar war against the great empires that had ruled Star. Lanes for millennia, and far beyond the orbit of Pluto, the source of the disturbance resolved itself into shapes as the distortion of folded space peeled back, and what emerged was formation so vast that even the automated threat assessment systems hesitated before assigning scale, because the leading elements alone massed more than entire sector fleets that had once fought wars spanning decades. And behind them came wave after wave of warships, their hulls dark and angular, their drives, burning with the cold, artificial light of technologies older than human civilization itself. And at the heart of that formation, still half veiled by the last fading ripples of transition, was a presence that bent sensor returns and cast a shadow across the data that could not be explained by size alone, a gravitational anomaly that suggested something far heavier, far more power-dense than any vessel humanity had yet encountered. And as the first clear images resolved, the insignia of the Kharax Dominion, one of the oldest and most expansionist powers in the known galaxy, flared across identification screens, a stylized sigil representing a predator's open maw, and in a dozen command centers across the system, officers who had studied galactic history felt a cold understanding settle in. Because the Kharax did not send exploratory forces, they sent conquering ones, and they did not respect treaties signed by those they believed could not enforce them, and for generations they had regarded humanity as a regional power at best, impressive for its age, but ultimately something that would either submit to their influence or be broken and absorbed, and now, at last, they had come in person to decide which fate would be assigned, and as the first Kharax transmission cut through the void on an open, untranslated carrier, a deep, resonant voice spoke in a language that the universal translators rendered with chilling clarity, announcing that the Sol system was now under the authority of the Dominion, that all military assets were to stand down, that planetary governments were prepared for compliance and integration, and that resistance would be met with overwhelming force. And in the quiet that followed those words, In rooms filled with people who had trained their entire lives for a moment like this, no one panicked, no one shouted, because humanity had known this day would come, if not from the Kharax, then from another empire like them, and long ago they had made a decision that they would never again be a species that waited helplessly for the judgment of others, and deep in secure vaults of Earth, Luna, and Mars, a directive that had not been activated in any real conflict since its creation was unlocked, a protocol reserved for threats that could not be handled by standard fleet doctrine. And as the command authorization codes flowed, a single word appeared on the status boards of the highest strategic command, a designation that carried, with it both promise and Dreadnought, and far from the eyes of the invading fleet, in a region of space masked by layered stealth fields and gravitational noise generators. Something immense began to move, something that had been built in silence over decades, its existence known only to a handful of leaders and engineers. Something that represented the answer humanity had prepared for the day when a power older and larger decided to test whether the young species of soul truly understood. War on a galactic scale, and as its systems came fully online and its drives warmed, the crews assigned to it, men and women who had trained in isolation for years without ever knowing that they would be called upon, took their stations with the calm professionals who understood the weight of what they were about to unleash. And in the vast command chamber at its core, the captain, a man named Daniel Harper, whose career had spanned frontier patrols, deep space engagements, and years of classified development programs, looked at the tactical projections showing the Kharax armada advancing with the confidence of a force that had never been truly challenged by a younger race, and he said quietly to his bridge crew that the galaxy was about to learn why humanity had chosen to build the ship, and with that, the last layers of concealment fell away, and the first human Dreadnought began its approach toward the invaders, its mass so great that local space-time itself seemed to ripple as it accelerated, and in the distant sensors of the Kharax fleet, anomalies began to appear that their own ancient systems struggled to categorize, and for the first time since they had entered the Sol system, a hint of uncertainty crept into their perfect formation, as something vast and unknown moved to meet them from the depths of human space, and the stage was set for the moment that would, in the years to come, be remembered across countless worlds as the instant when the galaxy went silent in the presence of a single human warship. The Dreadnought's approach was deliberate, calculated with a precision that only decades of careful engineering and strategic modeling could achieve, its hull bristling with defensive fields, kinetic absorbers, and weapon systems whose capabilities the Kharax had no reference for, and as it closed the distance, long-range sensors began to detect emissions that did not match any known technology cataloged from the Dominion's encounters with other civilizations, emissions that hinted at manipulation of gravitational lenses, subspace distortions, and energy compression well beyond anything the Kharax considered possible for a species of human origin. And inside the Dreadnought, the crew operated in near-perfect synchrony, executing drills that had been rehearsed countless times without error, every action coordinated, every reaction anticipated, every contingency accounted for, and the ship itself seemed almost alive as it integrated the will of its crew with the automated systems, creating a unified entity capable of thinking at speeds far faster than any human mind or alien AI alone could manage. And in the fleet centers across Earth, Luna, and Mars, commanders monitored the progress of their lone vessel with a mixture of awe and cautious optimism, knowing that the first engagement would be the test not just of the Dreadnought, but of every doctrine, every calculation, and every sacrifice that had led to this moment. And as the Kharax fleet detected the approach of the human warship, their initial confidence began to crack, as the magnitude of the target became undeniable, larger than any cruiser, heavier than any battleship, and moving with a grace that defied its size. And within the Central Command of the Kharax Armada, High Admiral Kharax, a veteran of countless campaigns across multiple sectors, ordered a full sensor sweep, trying to discern weaknesses, anomalies, and patterns, but the readings were inconsistent, defying known physics. And for the first time in his long career, doubt touched him, a hesitation that spread like a slow contagion through his sub-commanders. And as they debated strategy, the Dreadnought advanced, and the first human signals reached the Kharax, not as threats or ultimatums, but as precise, coldly confident communication, broadcasting their capabilities, not for diplomacy, but to demonstrate that this was not a force to be bargained with, and in those messages, subtle cues of strategy and Overwhelming firepower were embedded, ensuring that every calculation the Kharax made would have to account for possibilities they had never faced. And as the first volleys of human long-range disruptors began to sweep across the vanguard of the Dominion fleet, the effect was immediate and catastrophic, disabling the lead ships, severing subspace communications, and leaving the Kharax commanders scrambling to understand how such a seemingly small number of human vessels could produce such devastating precision. And with every passing second, the Dreadnought closed, every system firing in concert with relentless efficiency, kinetic barges and energy discharges so perfectly calculated that evasion was impossible. And as the battle unfolded, the humans revealed innovations the Kharax could not anticipate, adaptive shields that absorbed and redirected energy, targeting systems that learned and predicted in real time, and offensive protocols that combined brute force with surgical accuracy. And with each strike, entire wings of Kharax ships were rendered inoperative, not merely damaged, but neutralized in ways that left no room for recovery. And as the Dominion fleet began to scatter in confusion, High Admiral Kharax realized the gravity of the miscalculation they had made. The assumption that humans were a minor threat now shattered by the reality of a species whose ingenuity, preparation, and audacity could turn the tide of battle almost single-handedly. And even as the Dreadnought pressed the attack, deploying drones, automated strike units, and orbital interference devices that no Kharax formation could counter without exposing themselves, the human crews maintained a focus and calm that seemed almost supernatural to their adversaries. And across the Sol system, observation posts and command nodes recorded the engagement with a mixture of disbelief and pride, understanding that what they were witnessing was not simply a battle, but the unveiling of humanity's long-hidden mastery of warfare on a scale that even the oldest galactic powers had underestimated. And as the Dreadnought maneuvered with an elegance that made it almost untouchable, delivering volleys of fire with perfect timing and spacing, the Kharax ships began to fail, their engines overloading, their shields collapsing under pressure they had never anticipated. And as debris and fire cascaded across the void, the silence of the galaxy was no longer a metaphor, because every civilization with sensors in the vicinity paused in astonishment at the sight of a single human vessel capable of bending the course of an entire fleet. And deep inside the Dreadnought, Captain Daniel Harper watched the battle unfold on his tactical displays, noting the precise timing of each strike, the position of every enemy unit, and the execution of his crew, who had trained for this moment their entire lives. And he knew that when this engagement concluded, the galaxy would never again see humanity as a minor player, because the first human Dreadnought had entered battle, and the silence that followed was the calm recognition of a power no one had dared to predict. As the Dreadnought advanced further into the heart of the Kharax formation, the full scope of human engineering became undeniable, its hull composed of layered alloys interspersed with energy-phasing conduits that absorbed and rerouted incoming fire, while maintaining structural integrity beyond anything the Dominion had catalogued. And as it maneuvered, the adaptive sensor arrays tracked every movement of enemy vessels, feeding predictive algorithms that allowed the crew to anticipate maneuvers before they were executed. And in the bridge, Lieutenant Sophia Ramirez monitored these streams of data, issuing commands that were executed instantaneously across the ship, each action precisely coordinated to maximize efficiency and lethality. And the Kharax, for all their experience, found themselves responding to attacks that seemed preemptive, their tactics failing, because they could not account for the speed and intelligence embedded in human systems. And the Dreadnought deployed swarms of autonomous drones designed to overwhelm sensor systems, jam communications, and deliver pinpoint strikes. Each drone linked to the ship's main AI in a network that allowed instant recalibration and redirection at the scale of thousands simultaneously. And as the drones infiltrated the Kharax fleet, targeting engines, power cores, and weapon emplacements, the Dominion command structure began to crumble. Sub-commanders unable to coordinate under the stress of attacks they could not see coming or counter effectively. And in the Sol system, monitoring stations recorded the first human salvo with detailed clarity, noting the near-perfect accuracy of energy beams that pierced shields with surgical precision, kinetic projectiles that struck weak points engineered to fail under specific pressure thresholds, and electromagnetic pulses that disabled ship systems faster than repair crews could react. And as the battle unfolded, the Dreadnought unleashed a series of gravitational distortion fields, subtly bending space around the Kharax ships, causing navigational errors, collisions, and complete disorientation. And the Dominion vessels, built for centuries of dominance, were now struggling against physics manipulated by a species they considered primitive, and Admiral Kharax, seated in his flagship, struggled to process the scale of the losses. His communications flooded with reports of incapacitated ships, shield failures, and strategic positions lost in moments that should have taken hours to be compromised, and he realized too late that human tactics were not mere improvisation, but a deliberate, integrated doctrine of overwhelming precision, combining technological innovation, psychological impact, and spatial mastery in a manner no other race had attempted. And within the Dreadnought, the bridge crew executed each maneuver with a fluidity that blurred the line between human and machine, every gun, shield, and propulsion system working in seamless harmony. And the AI systems managing predictive targeting continuously updated every threat and opportunity, creating a dynamic battlefield where the human ship dictated every movement, every decision, and every outcome. And as the Dreadnought delivered a concentrated strike against the Kharax flagship, the largest vessel in the formation, the effect was instantaneous and devastating, tearing through armor, disrupting internal systems, and leaving the once mighty command vessel drifting inert its bridge, destroyed and crew incapacitated. And as debris scattered across space, the remaining Kharax vessels faltered, their formations dissolving as they attempted to retreat or regroup, and every maneuver they attempted was anticipated and countered by the Dreadnought, whose combination of human intuition, AI coordination, and technological superiority allowed it to dominate a fleet that outnumbered it by a factor of 10 to 1. And across the galaxy, observers from neighboring systems recorded the event in stunned silence, as communications relays carried reports of a single human warship annihilating a core segment of Dominion fleet. And the historical implications were immediate, because the story of underestimation, of species dismissed as weak, was being rewritten in real time. And even among human command, the gravity of the situation was not lost, as they recognized that this engagement was only the beginning, that the Dreadnought represented the spearhead of humanity's assertion of its rightful place in galactic affairs, and as it continued to press the advantage, disabling warp drives, severing communication arrays, and systematically neutralizing every threat, the Kharax, for the first time in their long history of conquest, experienced fear, a cold, calculating dread that spread through their ranks, because nothing in their experience could explain the resilience, speed, and devastating accuracy of a human vessel. And as the battle continued, the Dreadnoughts' weapons reached previously untested capacities, energy discharges so precise that they could sever superstructure without unnecessary collateral, drone strikes so coordinated that entire wings were neutralized before they could engage, and gravity fields so refined that ships were slowly spun apart without triggering automatic defense protocols. And deep inside the human command centers, analysts monitored the engagement with a mixture of exhilaration and focused tension, understanding that the Dreadnought's performance was a culmination of decades of design, training, and strategic foresight, and that the real lesson was that humanity, underestimated for centuries, had now proven itself capable of executing a level of warfare that demanded respect, caution, and a rethinking of interstellar power dynamics. And as the Dreadnought advanced toward the remaining Kharax vessels, the soundless void of space was filled with the subtle yet undeniable signs of domination, the glow of disrupted energy fields, the drifting debris of shattered ships, and the fading communications of fleet that had once ruled a vast swath of the galaxy with certainty. And in the midst of it all, Captain Harper remained calm, issuing commands, anticipating enemy reactions, and orchestrating destruction with a precision that ensured not a single opportunity was wasted. And the galaxy watched in silent awe as the first human Dreadnought demonstrated unequivocally that humanity had arrived, not as a minor species to be dismissed, but as a force capable of altering the balance of power. And in the minds of every observer, one undeniable truth settled in. When the first human Dreadnought entered battle, the galaxy went silent, and that silence was not emptiness, but the quiet recognition of a power that would not be ignored. The Kharax, now in disarray, attempted to regroup at the edges of their formation, desperately signaling for reinforcements from distant wings of their armada, but the Dreadnought anticipated these maneuvers, deploying advanced sensor nodes and intercept drones that cut off communications before the messages could even leave the system. And as they tried to coordinate a defensive perimeter, human tactical software recalculated trajectories and targeted weak points in real time, directing the ship's energy weapons, kinetic projectiles, and drone swarms with ruthless efficiency. In the vacuum between the wreckage, gravity anomalies introduced by the Dreadnought's specialized field generators caused enemy ships to collide, tumble, or spin uncontrollably, while small autonomous strike pods slipped through fracture formations to disable engines and weapons. Each pod linked to the ship's central AI and capable of autonomous learning to adapt to the unpredictable chaos of battle. And as the Kharax struggled to stabilize, human engineers on board the Dreadnought continued to optimize systems mid-combat, shifting power from energy shields to weapons as the tactical picture evolved, balancing thermal load, energy dispersion, and propulsion to maintain peak performance. And inside the bridge, the crew remained unflinching, a mixture of calm professionalism and quiet exhilaration, executing decades of preparation that had led to this moment. And the Kharax, unprepared for such seamless integration of human intuition and machine capability, found themselves overmatched, their centuries-old doctrines failing against a species that did not fight like anyone else. And in orbit around Mars, human observers watched as the Dreadnought unleashed a calculated wave of fire that tore through multiple enemy cruisers simultaneously, disabling critical systems and forcing the surviving vessels to retreat toward less densely populated sectors. And even as they withdrew, the Dreadnought maintained relentless pursuit, its engines capable of near-instantaneous vector adjustments and sublight acceleration that allowed it to intercept escape trajectories before the enemy could reach safer distances. And the Dominion commanders, faced with catastrophic losses and confusion, began to realize that human strategy was more than just brute force. It was anticipation, deception, psychological pressure, and a disciplined execution of tactics that exploited every weakness, every overconfidence, every hesitation. And as the Dreadnought's long-range disruptors neutralized warp-capable vessels, the Kharax found themselves trapped in a deadly engagement they had underestimated, and the psychological impact was immediate, as seasoned captains who had fought uncountable campaigns now hesitated, second-guessed, and made mistakes that only compounded their peril. And the Dreadnought, sensing these errors, adjusted its targeting in real time, exploiting gaps, cutting off flanks, and systematically dismantling enemy formations. And as it approached the last intact wing of the fleet, it unleashed a concentrated salvo that shattered the lead ships, leaving only scattered remnants, their engines failing, their weapons offline, their crews panicked, and the silence of space became absolute, punctuated only by the drifting wreckage of ships too damaged to maneuver or communicate. And in human command centers, a muted celebration began, tempered by the awareness that this was not merely a victory, but a declaration of capability, a demonstration that humanity had mastered the art of war on a galactic scale. And the Dreadnought itself, still fully functional and undamaged, advanced with measured grace, signaling its intent not to halt until the system was secure. And across the galaxy, sensors recorded the anomaly, every civilization capable of detection, noting the singularity of the event, a single human vessel executing maneuvers, delivering destruction, and maintaining dominance over forces that outnumbered it. And the implications were immediate, as historians, strategists, and military analysts realized that the concept of humanity as an emergent power had ended, replaced by a species that could enforce its will, dictate outcomes, and challenge the oldest empires with the technological and tactical sophistication of a species that had prepared for centuries. And within the Dreadnought, Captain Harper maintained focus, issuing precise commands, monitoring every strike, and ensuring that every action furthered the strategic objective while minimizing unnecessary destruction, demonstrating a combination of restraint and decisiveness that would redefine human command philosophy. And as the last Kharax vessels attempted to flee the system, they were met by human interdiction units, faster, smarter, and capable of overwhelming them without direct confrontation. And as the battle drew to a close, with the fleet scattered, crippled, or captured, the Dreadnought hovered in the void like a monument to human ingenuity, its systems humming, its crew poised, and the galaxy, watching to the network of long-range sensors, understood in that moment that the first human Dreadnought had not only survived a full-scale engagement against a dominant power, but had redefined the rules of interstellar warfare. leaving the Kharax fleet in ruins and all observers in silent awe. The very fabric of expectation shattered, and the echo of this single ship's actions would resonate across centuries, a lesson in caution, preparation, and the unstoppable potential of humanity. As the last remnants of the Kharax fleet retreated into the outer sectors, the Dreadnought maintained a measured advance, scanning, tracking, and cataloging every surviving vessel, every disrupted system, and every tactical anomaly, ensuring that humanity's first engagement would not leave hidden threats behind. And within the ship, the crew worked with an intensity born of purpose, monitoring sensor feeds, adjusting targeting algorithms, recalibrating shields, and preparing contingency plans in real time to account for any unexpected maneuver by the enemy. And the human tactical doctrine revealed itself as a multi-layered strategy that combined overwhelming precision with adaptive learning, allowing the ship to predict the enemy's reactions, counter them, and manipulate the battlefield on a scale no other species had achieved, and across the Sol system. The full impact of the Dreadnought's performance was being analyzed as command centers on Earth, Mars, and Luna began to recognize that the doctrines, technologies, and strategies that have been held in reserve for decades have been validated in real time, proving that humanity's preparation for a direct confrontation with ancient galactic power was not theoretical but operationally effective. And in the wreckage of the Kharax Armada, sensors detected ships disabled in ways that could not be reversed without total rebuilds, and command structures shattered, with surviving officers unable to coordinate, communicate, or even assess the remaining human threat. And as the Dreadnought continued to project power across the battle space, it deployed auxiliary drones that mapped the debris, salvaged critical components, and maintained control over the area, ensuring that no hostile element could regroup unnoticed. And deep within the command bridge, Captain Harper coordinated the final stages of engagement, focusing on maximizing the strategic advantage while minimizing unnecessary risk. And the ship's AI integrated each sensor feed, crew input, and environmental factor to produce a continuous optimization loop, executing maneuvers and strikes with a speed and precision that overwhelmed the remaining Kharax vessels, whose attempt at counteroffensive were systematically anticipated and neutralized. And across the galaxy, distant observers recorded the unprecedented capability of a single human vessel to dictate the outcome of an engagement against a fleet that should have been insurmountable. The Dreadnought's combination of mass, technology, and tactical acumen producing results that defied historical precedent. And in the control chambers on Luna, analysts noted the tactical genius behind every movement, the exploitation of physics in ways the Kharax had never anticipated, and the psychological impact on both human and alien observers, as a species previously dismissed as young and inexperienced now demonstrated dominance over an empire that had ruled star systems for centuries. And as the engagement concluded, the Dreadnought deployed its final wave of interdiction drones to secure the remaining sectors of space, preventing escape or regrouping, while also beginning the initial steps of reconstruction, repair, and salvage that would ensure humanity maintained the advantage. And as the ship's engines powered down slightly, maintaining readiness without overexertion, Captain Harper issued a final status report that summarized the engagement, detailing the overwhelming success of every strike, the efficiency of crew coordination, and the effectiveness of the combined AI-human tactical interface. And across the network of command centers, the report was received with a mixture of pride, relief, and recognition of a turning point in human history. Because the first human Dreadnought had not only survived and dominated a full-scale battle against the Kharax, but had also demonstrated the broader principle that humanity, underestimated and dismissed, possessed the strategic foresight, technological superiority, and tactical brilliance to challenge and defeat powers long regarded as invincible. And in the silence that followed the battle, the galaxy itself seemed to pause, sensors recording the absence of activity in a region that had been alive with war only moments before, and the weight of what had been accomplished settled over human command structures, as they realized that the demonstration of power, precision, and resilience displayed by the Dreadnought would forever change the perception of humanity, both among allies and adversaries, and that from this point forward, every species capable of observing or detecting human activity would have to factor in a new reality, that humanity was no longer merely a participant in galactic affairs, but a force that could enforce its will, dictate the outcomes of battles, and fundamentally alter the balance of power. And even among the surviving Kharax forces, fear had taken root there. Assumptions about human capabilities shattered, and the realization that they had underestimated a species that was prepared, resolute, and unflinchingly strategic would linger, shaping every decision, every formation, every retreat, and every potential engagement for decades to come. And as the Dreadnought systems transition into post-battle mode, securing the area, analyzing performance, and preparing for potential counterattacks, Captain Harper and his crew understood that the first battle was only the opening statement of humanity's emergence as a galactic power, that the silence that followed was not mere absence of sound, but profound recognition of capability, and the galaxy, in that instant, had learned a lesson it would not soon forget, the demonstration of what a single human dreadnought could achieve against overwhelming odds, leaving an indelible mark on history, strategy, and every species that watched, listened, or recorded the event, and the understanding settled in that the galaxy had changed forever, not through diplomacy or negotiation, but through a deliberate, calculated, and overwhelming assertion of human ingenuity and power. And the first human dreadnought, poised in the void, represented both a warning and a promise that humanity, underestimated for centuries, had finally proven that when pushed, it would respond not with fear, but with decisive and unmatched strength, and that no empire, no matter how ancient or vast, could assume superiority over a species willing to master every element of warfare, technology, and strategy to protect its home and assert its place among the stars. As the dust of battle settled in the region surrounding Sol, the Dreadnought remained vigilant, continuously scanning for hidden threats, rogue elements, or delayed attacks, its systems analyzing every debris field, every damaged vessel, and every anomalous energy signature to ensure that no remnant of the Kharax fleet could regroup unnoticed, and the human command structure maintained constant updates, tracking every movement, assessing long-term threats, and coordinating secondary units that had been deployed to monitor outer sectors and potential warp exit points. And within the Dreadnought, the crew continued to operate with unwavering focus, executing post-battle protocols, recalibrating systems, repairing minor damages, and running simulations to refine performance based on the engagement. And as the data from the battle flowed into the ship's central AI, the algorithms identified patterns, weaknesses, and opportunities, storing this information for immediate tactical use and future strategic planning. And across the Sol system, human observers began the meticulous work of cataloging the battle's impact, analyzing the debris fields for salvageable technology, evaluating the efficiency of energy distribution, and noting the unprecedented performance metrics displayed by the Dreadnought. And as intelligence analysts reconstructed the sequence of events, they realized that the engagement had not only been a demonstration of raw power, but a comprehensive validation of decades of preparation, training, and technological development. And the Kharax, watching from beyond the remaining sensor range, experienced a cascading realization of their misjudgment. Their assumptions about humanity shattered as they assessed the scale of their losses, the precision of the attacks, and the integration of AI and human command that had allowed a single vessel to neutralize an entire wing of their fleet. And across the galaxy, reports and sensor relays from neighboring civilizations recorded the unprecedented event, transmitting the data back to academic, military, and governmental institutions who struggled to comprehend how a species previously regarded as minor and untested could so thoroughly dominate a veteran armada. And as communication spread, debates erupted over the implications, with some factions revising their assessments of humanity immediately, and others attempting to downplay the significance, only to be countered by irrefutable evidence of the Dreadnought's actions. And within the Dreadnought itself, the crew ran continuous analyses of enemy tactics, storing every maneuver, every reaction, and every vulnerability observed in order to improve future engagements. And Captain Harper oversaw every operation, coordinating repairs, resupply of drones, recalibration of energy weapons, and adjustment of navigation systems to account for debris and microgravity shifts. And even as they completed these tasks, they prepared for the next potential engagement, knowing that the Kharax would not forget this defeat and would likely regroup to attempt retaliation or countermeasures. And the psychological effect on humanity's forces was profound, instilling confidence, reinforcing the effectiveness of training and doctrine, and demonstrating that meticulous preparation, technological mastery, and human ingenuity could decisively overcome numerically superior forces, and across the command network, planners began immediate revisions to galactic defense strategies, incorporating lessons learned from the battle, refining fleet coordination, and updating contingency plans based on the Dreadnought's performance. And as the Dreadnought maintained orbital patrols and sensor sweeps, it became clear that humanity's assertion of dominance was not temporary or limited to this engagement, but represented a permanent shift in the balance of power, a demonstration that one species, underestimated for centuries, could define the terms of conflict. And in the aftermath of the engagement, the Kharax were forced to reconsider not just the Sol system, but the entire strategic calculus for interacting with humanity, acknowledging that assumptions of weakness were now catastrophically invalid. And as the Dreadnought continued to patrol, ready to respond to any lingering threats, its presence alone became a deterrent, a statement to the galaxy that humanity had arrived not as an emerging power, but as a force capable of shaping the course of interstellar conflict. And in this silence, which stretched across the void between star systems, the first human Dreadnought became a symbol, a harbinger, and a warning, its actions reverberating through sensors, communications, and records, leaving no doubt that the galaxy had witnessed the capabilities of a species that would no longer be dismissed, underestimated, or ignored, and at this moment, recorded in exquisite detail, would serve as both precedent and lesson for generations to come, that when humanity chose to engage, it did so with precision, strategy, and overwhelming power, and the silence that followed was the acknowledgement of this reality, an unspoken recognition across civilizations that the first human Dreadnought had rewritten the expectations of warfare, dominance, and interstellar balance, and that the galaxy itself had paused, listening, learning, and forever changed by the demonstration of human capability in the void. Even as the Dreadnought maintained its patrols and monitoring, subtle signals in the void indicated that remnants of the Kharax, desperate to regain control, were attempting to regroup in hidden pockets beyond the edge of sensor range, and the ship's AI immediately calculated intercept courses, deploying specialized reconnaissance drones to map gravitational anomalies, energy signatures, and micro-warp tunnels that could conceal enemy movements. And as each potential threat was identified, the Dreadnought executed precise maneuvers to position itself advantageously, creating zones of denial that restricted the Kharax from regrouping or escaping without being detected or neutralized, and the human crew, trained to anticipate complex maneuvers across multiple axes of engagement, coordinated with the AIs seamlessly, issuing adjustments and commands that allowed simultaneous management of offensive and defensive operations across multiple theaters of engagement. And even as they tracked, these remnants, repair and recalibration teams aboard the ship maintained operational readiness, ensuring that every weapon, propulsion system, and shield array operated at peak efficiency. And in distant command centers, intelligence analysts watched with awe as the Dreadnought effectively created a dynamic battlefield in which the enemy's options were continually constricted, every movement anticipated and countered with precision, demonstrating a level of situational awareness that no other species had yet displayed. And as the Kharax attempted minor counterattacks, small, targeted strikes against isolated points in the human system, they were intercepted before they could achieve any impact, neutralized by drones or disabled by predictive targeting, and the psychological effect on the surviving Kharax commanders was profound, as even their most experienced captains realized that no strategy they could devise would evade the Dreadnought's coordination, adaptability, and overwhelming firepower. And as reports of battle and its aftermath spread across the galaxy, historians, strategists, and militaries began reassessing the capabilities of humanity, recognizing that a species previously dismissed as young and untested could produce outcomes that rivaled and even surpassed the most seasoned empires. And within the Dreadnought, Captain Harper continued to monitor all systems, ensuring that while the immediate threats were neutralized, readiness remained absolute, and that any attempt by the Kharax to reorganize or launch a delayed offensive could be met with immediate and decisive response. And as the Dreadnought projected its presence across multiple sectors, deploying observation and interdiction units, the human forces across the Sol system coordinated to maintain secure control, mapping debris fields, monitoring warp lanes, and ensuring that communication channels remain intact and uncompromised. And across the galaxy, other civilizations noted the unprecedented performance of a single human vessel against a fleet that had been regarded as overwhelmingly superior, and as data was transmitted, it became clear that the Dreadnought had not merely survived the engagement, but had redefined the understanding of interstellar combat, demonstrating the power of integrated human-AI operations, predictive tactics, and technological superiority in a single cohesive platform. And as Captain Harper prepared for potential new threats, he also recognized that the demonstration served a broader strategic purpose, signaling to both allies and adversaries that humanity's reach, preparation, and willpower had arrived at a level that demanded respect, adaptation, and caution, and that the first human dreadnought was not just a ship, but a symbol, a herald of a species that refused to be underestimated, that had transformed centuries of preparation into an undeniable statement of strength. And in the void of space, across the sensors of distant systems, the silence persisted, filled not with emptiness, but with the resonance of a species asserting itself, demonstrating that the galaxy had changed, that assumptions of human weakness were irrevocably invalid, and that from this moment onward, every strategy, every engagement, and every diplomatic encounter would have to account for the reality revealed by the Dreadnought's actions. And as the crew of the ship rested for the briefest moment, monitoring ongoing operations while remaining ready to act instantly, the weight of history settled over them, understanding that the first human dreadnought had not merely won a battle, but had altered the balance of power, challenged ancient assumptions, and sent a clear message across the stars. Humanity would no longer be ignored, underestimated, or dismissed, and the galaxy had gone silent, not in fear of absence, but in recognition of force that had declared itself without compromise. And in that silence, every observer knew that the actions of a single vessel had forever rewritten the expectations of what a human could achieve. The capabilities of technology and strategy fused with discipline, foresight, and courage to produce an outcome that would resonate for centuries, and that the first human dreadnought, poised in the void, represented the dawning of a new era in which humanity would be acknowledged, respected, and feared across the galaxy. With the remnants of the Kharax retreating into distant sectors and their ability to wage organized combat effectively neutralized, the first human dreadnought lingered in the void, scanning, monitoring, and asserting a presence that could not be ignored. And within its massive hull, the crew continued to perform post-battle analysis, ensuring that every data point from the engagement was recorded, stored, and immediately integrated into tactical and strategic databases, enhancing the ship's predictive algorithms, improving future combat response times, and refining the integration between human decision-making and AI processing to levels previously considered unattainable. And across the Sol system, human command centers coordinated follow-up operations, deploying unmanned drones to secure the debris fields, conducting salvage operations on disabled Kharax vessels, and preparing secondary defensive perimeters around key planetary assets to prevent surprise incursions. And the psychological and strategic impact of the engagement rippled outward across the galaxy, as every sensor, relay, and observation point capable of recording the event transmitted the performance of the Dreadnought to historians, military strategists, and political analysts, forcing a complete reassessment of humanity's capabilities. While within the Dominion, panic and uncertainty spread among Kharax commanders who had once regarded the Sol system as an easily dominated region, and their decades of assumptions were shattered as they confronted the reality that a single human vessel had systematically dismantled a core segment of their fleet, nullified command structures, and demonstrated operational and tactical superiority on a scale previously thought impossible. And as the Dreadnought continued its patrols, projecting a presence across multiple sectors, Captain Daniel Harper oversaw ongoing operations with meticulous attention, ensuring that the ship remained fully combat-ready, that every system operated at maximum efficiency, and that crew readiness, morale, and operational coordination were maintained. And as the AI integrated ongoing observations, recalibrated energy systems, and optimized navigation and combat algorithms, it became clear that the combination of human intuition, strategic foresight, and adaptive AI capabilities had produced a force multiplier so effective that conventional metrics of naval warfare no longer applied. And across the wider galaxy, other civilizations began to assimilate the lessons of the engagement, recognizing that assumptions of human weakness, technological limitations, and tactical naivety were now obsolete, and that the emergence of humanity as a dominant interstellar force would require fundamental reassessment of fleet compositions, strategic doctrines, and engagement protocols. And as debris from the battle drifted through space, the Dreadnought initiated controlled salvage and reconstruction operations, retrieving critical components, analyzing alien technologies, and preparing for continued deterrence and engagement, while simultaneously projecting a clear message. Humanity would defend its systems, assert its sovereignty, and employ overwhelming capability against any adversary that challenged it. And as communications networks across human-controlled space broadcast analyses, tactical summaries, and real-time sensor data from the battle, military academies, research institutions, and planetary defense authorities began to revise doctrines, train personnel on lessons learned, and integrate the demonstrated capabilities of the Dreadnought into long-term planning, ensuring that the knowledge gained from this engagement would amplify humanity's defensive and offensive capacity exponentially. And in the Kharax command centers, the remaining leaders confronted the sobering reality that the assumptions guiding their strategy had failed catastrophically, that the underestimation of humanity's potential had resulted in the loss of ships, personnel, and credibility, and that any further attempts to assert control over the Sol system would encounter not just a fleet, but a species that had demonstrated the ability to anticipate, adapt, and dominate on a scale unmatched in known galactic history. And within the Dreadnought, Captain Harper reflected on the crew's performance, the precision of the AI, and the integrated systems that had made the engagement a success, knowing that while the battle itself had concluded, the strategic ramifications would continue for decades, reshaping alliances, deterrence postures, and perception of humanity across multiple empires. And as the Dreadnought's engines maintain a low-power orbit while all systems continue to monitor and secure the surrounding space, the crew remain alert, ready to respond to any unforeseen developments, yet aware that this engagement had irrevocably altered the galaxy's understanding of human capability. And the silence that now pervaded the void was both literal and figurative, a profound pause that reflected not absence but recognition, a moment when civilizations across multiple sectors had witnessed the rise of species that would no longer be underestimated, dismissed, or ignored, and the first human Dreadnought, standing as both guardian and harbinger, marked a definitive statement that humanity, long underestimated, had arrived as a force that could dominate, protect, and define the terms of interstellar engagement, and that the galaxy in that instant went silent, not in fear of what was to come, but in awe and acknowledgement of what had already been accomplished, the single human vessel forever inscribed into the annals of history as the instrument by which a young species declare itself fully, irrevocably, and overwhelmingly capable in the cosmic arena. And in that silence, every observer, every analyst, and every civilization understood that humanity had reshaped the balance of power, the rules of engagement, and the expectations of what a single species could achieve, and that the first human Dreadnought had not only survived the trial of combat, but had emerged as the defining symbol of a new era, where humanity would command respect, demand attention, and never again be underestimated in the theater of the stars.